She had one of the most haunting voices of the 90s. Dolores O'Riordan led the Cranberries from small-town Ireland to global fame, creating songs that defined a generation. But behind the success was a story few really knew, a life filled with struggle, heartbreak, and a tragic end that shocked the world. Join us as we explore the heartbreaking story behind her music and her untimely death. The making of a musician. Dolores O'Riordan's story starts far from the bright lights she would one day stand under. She was born on September 6, 1971, in Ballybricken, a small rural community outside Limerick in Ireland. Life there was simple and quiet, but not easy. She was the youngest of 7 children in a crowded 2-bedroom home. Her father, Terence, had worked as a farm laborer until a serious motorbike accident left him unable to work. Her mother, Eileen, was deeply religious, strong-willed, and devoted to keeping the family together. Money was tight, but family duty, faith, and routine were non-negotiable parts of daily life. Being the youngest in a big family shaped Dolores early on. She grew up watching the struggles around her, the stress of finances, the limits placed on her parents, and the quiet sacrifices that never really got talked about. The home was loving but strict. There was structure, there were rules. There was also the unspoken understanding that you didn't complain. You carried on. The Catholic Church played a huge part in her childhood. It wasn't just a place to visit on Sundays. It was at the center of the world she knew. From an early age, music for Dolores meant hymns, psalms, and church songs. Popular music was not freely flowing through her house. Instead, she spent years playing the church organ and singing Gregorian chants. This kind of training was unusual for someone her age, especially in that setting, but it gave her control, discipline, and a strong musical foundation. It also trained her ear and voice in a way that later made her sound completely different from other singers in rock and pop. Behind this strict and religious setting, there was darker pain that followed her throughout her life. As she would reveal many years later, Dolores suffered sexual abuse by an older man when she was a child. On top of this, when she was young, she witnessed her sister accidentally set their family home on fire. Events like these left scars she did not fully share publicly for a long time. In interviews, she hinted at a past full of things left unsaid, once admitting, "I have a lot of secrets about my childhood." That mix of silence, shame, and survival stayed with her and often came out in her lyrics and the emotion in her voice. Growing up in a house full of brothers, Dolores often felt the difference in how boys and girls were treated. She noticed how boys were praised just for being boys, while girls had to behave a certain way, look a certain way, or prove themselves. This unfairness pushed her to become tough, outspoken, and independent. She was a tomboy, more comfortable in boots than in pretty expectations, and she refused to sit quietly in the background. Music became her escape and her power. At around 5 years old, her nursery headmistress stood her on a piano and asked her to sing for the class. Instead of shrinking away, Dolores sang. That small moment was the start of something important. She realized people listened when she opened her mouth. Meeting the Cranberries. By 1990, Dolores O'Riordan had the voice, the songs, and the drive. She just needed the right band. That chance came when a local Limerick group called Cranberries Saw Us started looking for a new singer. Their previous vocalist, Niall Quinn, had left. And while the band had some songs and a sense of humor, they were still more of a casual act than a serious career project. Even their name was a joke, based on the phrase "cranberry sauce" said quickly. The group, brothers Noel and Mike Hogan, along with drummer Fergal Lawler, were now ready to move beyond that light, novelty style and find a more defined sound. They wanted a female singer who could bring something real and emotional. That's when Dolores walked into their lives. Dolores heard through a mutual friend that Cranberries Saw Us needed a new vocalist. She showed up to the audition in a pink tracksuit, carrying her keyboard, looking nothing like the typical image of a rock frontwoman, and not trying to. When she began to sing, everything changed. She played a few of her own songs, and her voice struck the band immediately. Sharp, haunting, emotional, and completely different from anything they'd heard locally. Noel, Mike, and Fergal were stunned not only by her voice, but also by the fact that she was already a songwriter with her own ideas. It felt like the missing piece had dropped into place. At the end of that first meeting, they gave her an instrumental track built around 4 looping chords. It was simple, but they wanted to see what she would do with it. Dolores took it away, and when she came back, she brought with her a full vocal melody and lyrics. That song became Linger. It would eventually turn into one of the Cranberries' most famous songs, but even in that early stage, it confirmed something important. Dolores was not just a singer for hire. She was the creative heart the band needed. With Linger, she claimed her role as frontwoman and co-writer in a very natural way. The early sound of the band grew out of this mix of elements: Dolores's deeply personal lyrics and distinct vocal style, and the Hogan brothers and Lawler's jangly melodic alternative rock backing. This contrast gave their songs emotional weight without losing brightness or melody. Still, in the beginning, they were not polished performers. At local shows in Limerick, they often played with their heads down, shy and reserved. Dolores would sometimes sing, turned slightly to the side, rather than command the stage. They were still figuring out how to match the growing power of their music with confidence in front of strangers. As they kept writing together, a strong partnership formed between Dolores and Noel Hogan. He would come up with guitar parts and musical ideas. She would build lyrics and melodies that turned those ideas into full songs. The trust between them made it possible for the band to move quickly from a small local act to something that felt much bigger. To take the next step, they needed a proper recording. They went into Zarek Studios in Limerick and recorded a demo that became known as the Water Circle EP. It captured early versions of the sound they were building together. These recordings began to circulate, and the reaction was fast and serious. People in the music industry heard something special. Around this time, the name was shortened from Cranberries Saw Us to simply the Cranberries. Cleaner, stronger, and better suited to the emotional weight of their songs. And now, with a record deal in hand, their real climb was just getting started. Struggles and breakthrough. When the Cranberries signed with Island Records, it looked like everything was lined up for a strong debut. But their first steps into making an album were much more difficult than anyone expected. The band began recording their debut with producer Pierce Gilmore at Zarek Studios in Limerick, the same place they had used for early demos. At first, it seemed like a natural move. But as the sessions went on, problems grew. The production style started to move away from who they really were. Extra layers, artificial beats, and industrial-style guitar sounds were added that did not match Dolores O'Riordan's voice or the band's emotional songs. What made them special? Dolores's fragile but powerful vocals, the gentle guitar work, and the open space in the music was getting buried. The band felt uncomfortable. This wasn't the sound they heard in their heads. The songs were becoming something they didn't recognize. Eventually, they and the label agreed that the direction was wrong. Gilmore was let go from the project, and the band needed someone who understood their strengths instead of trying to reshape them into something trendy. That person was Stephen Street, a respected producer known for his work with the Smiths and Morrissey. Street listened carefully to what they had and saw what mattered: Dolores's unique voice, the simple but strong melodies, and the emotional honesty of their songs. In the studio, he stripped away the clutter and helped the band find a clean, warm, and natural sound. With his guidance, Everybody Else Is Doing It, So Why Can't We finally began to take its true form. Once the album was ready, Island Records built a smart and steady plan rather than chasing instant hype. They knew this band's strength was emotional connection, so they went directly to the listeners most likely to respond. They targeted college and alternative radio stations across the United States. Cassette samplers with songs like Dreams and Linger were handed out at shows, record shops, and events. MTV's late-night and alternative-focused programs started giving the band airtime, slowly introducing them to a wider audience. Next comes the moment where that growing confidence turns into something louder, heavier, and far more confrontational. Birth of Zombie. After the worldwide success of Everybody Else Is Doing It, So Why Can't We?, the Cranberries had very little time to slow down. They spent months touring across continents, going from small venues to large stages. The experience made them tighter as musicians and stronger as a band. By the time they started work on their second album, they had changed. The quiet, dreamy sound of their debut had grown into something louder and more confident. They were ready to take risks. This was the mindset that shaped No Need to Argue, an album that would define the peak of their career. It was during this time that Dolores began writing Zombie. The song came from a place of anger and sadness. In March 1993, two young boys, 3-year-old Jonathan Ball and 12-year-old Tim Perry, were killed in a bombing in Warrington, England. The attack, linked to the ongoing conflict in Northern Ireland known as the Troubles, shocked people across Ireland, and the UK Dolores, who was touring in the UK at the time, heard the news and was deeply affected. She couldn't stop thinking about the lives lost and the endless cycle of violence. To her, it wasn't just politics. It was children dying because adults refused to stop fighting. One night on tour, she began to write. Sitting with an acoustic guitar, she put her feelings into words and melody. What began as a quiet, emotional idea soon became something much more forceful. When she brought the song to the band, it sounded simple and stripped down. But Dolores had a clear vision. She wanted it to sound angry, heavy, and direct. At first, the others tried turning it into their usual softer indie pop sound, but she pushed back. She told them that the music had to reflect the message. This was not a gentle love song, it was a protest. So they turned up the guitars, hit the drums harder, and built a fierce rock anthem around her voice. Zombie was different from anything the Cranberries had done before. The chorus, with Dolores's haunting wail of in your head," captured both her pain and defiance. It was raw and unapologetic. It also carried risk. The song openly criticized the violence surrounding the Troubles, a sensitive subject that many artists avoided. Island Records, the band's label, feared backlash and thought the song might alienate some listeners. They even offered Dolores a $1 million incentive to record a different single instead. She refused. According to those close to her, she ripped up the check on the spot. She believed strongly that Zombie needed to be heard. For her, staying silent was not an option. When Zombie was released as a single in 1994, it caused an immediate reaction. Fans and critics were shocked by its heaviness, but also drawn to its honesty. It wasn't just a song, it was a statement. The music video, directed by Samuel Bayer, helped amplify its power. Bayer, known for Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit, mixed footage of the Northern Ireland conflict with striking scenes of Dolores painted in gold, surrounded by children painted silver. The mix of real-life violence and haunting imagery gave the song even more impact. It was both beautiful and disturbing to watch, just like the song itself. By the time the album was released, the Cranberries had proven they could evolve without losing their identity. No Need to Argue went on to sell nearly 20 million copies worldwide, far surpassing their debut. More than anything, it showed that Dolores O'Riordan's voice, both musically and emotionally, had no limits. And soon, the pressures of that massive fame would start to take a serious toll. Fame and fallout. As the Cranberries moved deeper into the mid-1990s, the success that had lifted them up also began to wear them down. With No Need to Argue turning into a global hit, the band faced constant pressure. Interviews, photo shoots, Tours, TV spots, radio sessions, and endless questions about Dolores O'Riordan's voice, image, and opinions. For a singer who came from a private, conservative world and carried deep personal wounds, this level of scrutiny was difficult, and the media, especially in the UK, did not make it any easier. British tabloids began to twist and exaggerate stories about Dolores. One of the ugliest moments came when a paper claimed she had performed on stage without underwear during a show in Hamburg. It was not true. The report was clearly meant to sexualize and embarrass her. Dolores fought back. She sued the Daily Star and won. The paper was forced to apologize and pay damages, which she donated to charity. Even with that victory, the damage was done in another way. Her trust in the press was broken. She was already guarded. Now she became even more careful, more suspicious, and more tired of being turned into a headline instead of being seen as a person. The strain of fame also showed up on the road. One of the most chaotic events came during a free Cranberries concert in Washington, D.C., organized by local radio station WHFS. The show was expected to draw around 3,000 people. Instead, more than triple that number showed up. There were not enough police, not enough barriers, and not enough control. The crowd grew restless as the show started late. When the band finally went on, the situation spun out quickly. Mosh pits, people surging forward, and fans climbing and jumping. After only a short time on stage, authorities and organizers pulled the plug for safety reasons. The crowd turned angry. Objects were thrown, the scene fell apart, and in the chaos, Dolores's acoustic guitar was stolen. The band was rushed away. What was meant to be a celebration became a frightening example of how big and unstable things had become. By the time they reached the To the Faithful Departed era in 1996, the cracks were showing clearly. The band had pushed themselves hard without real breaks. They had toured the world several times in just a few years. They were worn out. The album itself reflected a darker mood. It included heavier songs and more political themes, along with tracks that touched on loss, addiction, and grief. While it sold well, it did not receive the same warm critical response as their first two records. Some critics called it too heavy, too direct, or unfocused. The band felt misunderstood, and the pressure to match past success only made things worse. All of this set the stage for what came next, a breaking point that would force Dolores to step away and face what fame had done to her. Rediscovery through motherhood. By 1996, the nonstop pace had finally pushed Dolores O'Riordan past her limit. The Cranberries had toured the world over and over, released albums back to back, and faced constant pressure to keep delivering hits. On the outside, they were still a successful band. On the inside, Dolores was falling apart. She was dealing with exhaustion, unresolved trauma from her childhood, and the intense pressure of fame. Her body and mind started to show the strain. Panic, stress, and physical pain became part of her daily life. Eventually, it was too much. Tours were canceled. Public appearances stopped. For a while, Dolores simply stepped out of view. During this period, she went through what she later described as a breakdown. She had grown to hate the machine around her, the schedules, the scrutiny, the feeling of being treated like a product instead of a human being. She felt trapped and unhappy, even though she had everything people thought she should want. Depression and anxiety took hold. She spoke later about crying constantly, feeling lost, and even wishing for a normal life where nobody recognized her. The girl from Ballybricken, who once saw music as her freedom, now felt crushed by what that success had become. Everything began to change in 1997 with the birth of her first child. Becoming a mother gave Dolores something she desperately needed, a reason to slow down, and a connection that wasn't based on charts, sales, or public opinion. In her child, she found a kind of love and responsibility that grounded her. Home life, Cooking, caring, and small routines gave her a sense of safety and balance that had been missing for years. It did not erase her struggles, but it gave her strength. She has said that if it were not for her son, the band might not have survived at all. Slowly, music stopped feeling like a burden and started to feel meaningful again. With time away from heavy touring, she could write from a calmer place. When the Cranberries returned with Bury the Hatchet in 1999, it marked more than just another album cycle. The record showed a shift in tone. While there were still emotional and serious songs, there were also themes of forgiveness, rebuilding, and family. You can hear a woman trying to balance her role as an artist with her role as a mother, a partner, and a person rebuilding herself after burnout. This period did not fix everything, but it gave Dolores a new lens on her life. One where success was not just fame, but also stability, love, and choice. Next comes the part where the music world shifts, the business gets messy, and the band has to decide how to move forward. Dolores's return. After several quiet years apart, the Cranberries found their way back to each other. In 2009, the band reunited, first for live shows and then in the studio. The chemistry was still there. They were older, calmer, and had lived through burnout, family life, business problems, and personal struggles. That shared history gave their new work a different feeling. When they released Roses in 2012, it didn't try to copy their 90s sound, but it gently echoed it. The album felt reflective, softer, and more patient. The songs showed a band that understood loss, distance, and trying again. Critics noted the maturity in the writing and the sense that Dolores O'Riordan had grown into her own story, not just as a star from the past, but as a woman looking back with honesty. But while the music sounded steady, Dolores's inner life was growing more unstable. Her marriage to Don Burton, whom she had once described as a strong source of support and protection, was breaking down. They had 3 children together, and the split was painful and public. At the same time, Dolores began struggling more heavily with alcohol and prescription medication. These were not just bad habits. They were tied to deeper issues, her history of trauma, pressure, and mental health challenges that had never fully gone away. In 2014, things reached a crisis point. On a flight from New York to Ireland, Dolores was involved in a disturbing incident. She reportedly caused a scene on the plane and later assaulted a police officer after landing. The story quickly hit the news. It was upsetting for fans who were used to seeing her as strong, sharp, and in control on stage. In court, her legal team explained that she was dealing with serious mental health issues. Around this time, she was formally diagnosed as bipolar. This diagnosis helped explain some of the extreme highs and lows she had experienced over the years, but it also showed how much she had been carrying, often without the right support. Looking for a reset, Dolores spent more time away from her old routines. She moved to New York for a period, living in hotels and trying to find a fresh start. There, she connected with musician and DJ Ole Koretsky and former The Smiths bassist Andy Rourke. Together, they formed a side project called DARK. This new band gave her a different space to create, outside the expectations that came with the Cranberries' name. Their album, Science Agrees, released in 2016, blended rock, electronic sounds, and darker moods. It didn't reach the same level of success as her earlier work, but it mattered for another reason. It showed that Dolores was still trying, still searching for new ways to express herself, even as her life behind the scenes remained complicated. On the surface, this period looked like a mix of reunion and reinvention, a classic comeback story. But underneath, Dolores was still fighting the same shadows: mental health struggles, addiction, heartbreak, and the pressure to keep going. Next comes the final painful turn in her story, where hope, work, and tragedy collide. Her tragic death. In 2017, it seemed from the outside like Dolores O'Riordan had found a new sense of balance in her work. The Cranberries released something else, a collection of acoustic and orchestral versions of their classic songs, along with a few new tracks. The album did more than revisit old hits. It stripped them down and presented them with a calmer, more reflective tone. Dolores's voice sounded older, but in a strong and moving way, less about proving herself and more about telling the story. It felt like a quiet return to form, a reminder of who she was as a songwriter and performer beneath all the noise of her struggles. Even though touring was again disrupted due to health and back issues, the creative spark was clearly still there. At the same time, Dolores was staying active with new ideas. One of the projects she was excited about was recording a new version of Zombie with the American band Bad Wolves. Their heavier style gave the song a different edge, and Dolores was set to add her vocals. She was also in touch with producer Youth, discussing further work and new recordings. These plans showed that, despite setbacks and ongoing mental health challenges, she was still looking forward, still building, still wanting to make music that mattered. The picture of her final days is especially heartbreaking because of how hopeful she sounded. On the night before her death, Dolores left a series of voicemails for her friend and label contact, Dan Waite. In those messages, she sounded positive and bright. She talked about her children, her work, her excitement about the Bad Wolves collaboration, and her future plans. She even sang a few lines of Bittersweet Symphony down the phone. These details matter because they show that she was not giving up. She was making plans, thinking ahead, and reaching out. On January 15, 2018, while staying at the Park Lane Hilton in London, Dolores O'Riordan was found unresponsive in the bathtub of her hotel room. She was 46 years old. An inquest later concluded that her death was the result of accidental drowning. Toxicology reports showed that the prescription drugs in her system were at therapeutic levels, meaning they were not taken in dangerous excess. However, her blood alcohol level was very high. Investigators determined that she had drowned while intoxicated. There was no evidence that she had planned to end her life. Instead, it was a tragic combination of vulnerability, alcohol, and bad timing. The news of her death spread quickly, and the reaction was immediate and emotional. Fans across the world mourned a voice that had been part of their lives for decades. Fellow musicians, friends, and collaborators shared stories of her kindness, humor, talent, and stubborn strength. It was clear how much she had meant to people, both as the lead singer of the Cranberries and as an individual who had never fully hidden her struggles. Shortly after her passing, Bad Wolves released their cover of Zombie. The song became a major hit, topping rock charts and reaching new audiences, while Dolores had reportedly liked their version and planned to sing on it. The timing of the release so soon after her death felt uncomfortable to some, including her bandmates. Noel Hogan and Fergal Lawler later expressed that the single seemed to come out too quickly and felt insensitive, even though the band did donate a significant portion of the proceeds, reported at $250,000, to Dolores's children. It was a complex mix of tribute, business, and grief. In the months that followed, the surviving members of the Cranberries completed work on In the End, built from demo vocals Dolores had recorded. Released in 2019, it served as a final goodbye. After its release, the band confirmed they would not continue without her. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next one.